The silence didn't scare me at first. It was the way she blinked slower than usual. The way her fingers tensed when I reached for her hand, like something inside her recoiled before she could even think about it. You don't plan to remember these things, but your nervous system does. Your nervous system keeps the score when love turns into tolerance. It happened on a Wednesday. I don't remember the date, but I remember what she was wearing, a navy blue hoodie that wasn't mine. That part stuck. She used to live in my old college sweaters. But this one had a logo I'd never seen, from a place we'd never been together. I asked her where she got it, and she muttered, "It's just something I had." And that was it. I don't even know why I reached for her. It wasn't a romantic moment. She was just leaning over the counter, scrolling through something on her phone. Probably memes. Or maybe messages I'll wish I never knew existed. But I reached out, softly, slowly, and placed my hand on her lower back. It wasn't even a full touch, more like a memory of one. She stiffened. Then she moved away without saying a word. She didn't look at me. She didn't ask me to stop. She just shifted. Like I was background static in a room she forgot I was still occupying. And I wish I could say I pulled away with dignity. That I stood tall, that I smiled, that I walked away a proud man. But I just stood there, hand hanging in midair like I'd forgotten how arms worked. When she finally did speak, it was to ask if I could pick up oat milk the next day. Oat milk. As if I hadn't just had my soul vacuumed out through my chest. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, I was afraid my voice would crack. I knew that if I opened my mouth, even a syllable would split me open, and she'd see everything I was trying to swallow down. Instead, I walked into the hallway, closed the bathroom door, and stood in the dark, listening to my own heartbeat like it was someone else's. That was the moment I ghosted her. Not out of revenge. Not to play games. I just gave up. Quietly. Entirely. I stopped texting her when I got to work. I didn't check in during her late nights. I stopped offering to cook, to plan things, to exist around her with any weight. I became furniture. And for a while, she didn't seem to notice. That was the most brutal part. Days passed. She went about her routines. But then something shifted. She started hesitating before leaving for work. She paused longer at the doorway. She stared at her phone like it had betrayed her. She started asking, "Everything okay?" with this unnatural chirp in her voice. But I just smiled and said, "All good." Because I wasn't going to explain my absence to someone who never asked for my presence in the first place. And then, the first real crack. I caught her crying in the car. She didn't know I could see her from the upstairs window. She sat there, hands gripping the wheel, tears streaking down, trying to pull herself together before she backed out of the driveway. I should have gone down. I should have opened the door. I should have said something. But I didn't. I turned off the light, stepped back, and let her drive off into whatever silence she helped build between us. 3 days passed after the car crying incident, and I didn't mention a word about it. She didn't know I saw. She never brought it up, and neither did I. But something in her shifted. She started hovering, like a ghost pacing its own grave. She lingered around the kitchen when I made my silent coffee. She'd glance at me when I scrolled through my phone in bed, pretending not to care. And when I didn't offer a kiss goodbye one morning, she stood in the doorway 5 seconds too long, as if waiting for something that never came. I thought she'd snap. I thought she'd call me out. Ask what was wrong. Demand to know why I'd stopped orbiting around her like a broken satellite. But she didn't. Tessa wasn't the confrontational type. She was the type to suffer in silence, and she was finally getting a taste of her own recipe. The next crack was subtle, but I noticed it like it was written in red ink. She started texting me again during the day. At first, it was practical. "Did you see my charger?" Or, "Are you home before 7?" But then came the old emojis. The ones she used to send back when we still meant something. A heart here. A little wink there. Like she was casting fishing lines and praying I'd bite. I didn't. Not out of pride. Not even spite. I just couldn't pretend anymore. I'd given so much of myself to someone who kept holding up signs that said, "Try harder," even when I had nothing left to give. My silence wasn't a game. It was a funeral. And I didn't know how to grieve someone who was still brushing her teeth in my mirror every morning. The breaking point came on a Sunday, the kind of day that used to mean slow music, pancakes, and dancing barefoot in the kitchen. She walked in wearing that same hoodie, the one I was sure wasn't mine, and asked if I wanted to go for a walk like we used to. Her voice had this forced casual tone to it, like she was afraid of sounding like she cared too much. I looked at her and simply said, "No thanks. Got a lot on my mind." Her smile twitched. And then, just like that, it fell. "Are you mad at me?" she asked after a pause. I could have said yes. I could have unloaded everything, the touch she rejected, the hoodie, the silence, the way she made me feel like a tenant in my own marriage. But I didn't. I just looked at her and said, I'm not anything. She blinked, her bottom lip parting like she was about to say something else, but she didn't. She just nodded and backed out of the room, as if she realized too late that she'd knocked on a door that no longer opened. Later that evening, I heard her voice from the hallway, soft, hushed, frantic. At first, I thought she was talking to herself. But the low pauses, the occasional laughter, the nervous tone, it was a phone call. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I stopped halfway down the stairs when I caught one sentence that made my heart twist sideways. No, he hasn't touched me in weeks. I don't know what's going on. It's like he's not even here. And then she laughed. Light, nervous, like she didn't know whether to cry or flirt. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I walked back upstairs and lay on our bed staring at the ceiling fan, letting it slice the silence into pieces above my head. I wasn't angry. I was hollow. That was the thing. You always think the worst part of losing someone is the heartbreak, the pain, the grief, the betrayal. But sometimes, it's the numbness that rots you out from the inside. Later that night, she crawled into bed and actually moved closer to me. That hadn't happened in forever. But I didn't respond. I kept my eyes closed, breathing even, pretending to be asleep. I felt her stop inches away from my back. Her hand hovered. I could feel the heat of it, but she never touched me. She just stayed there, breathing, waiting. I don't know if she cried, but I do know I didn't move an inch. It was the little things that made it unbearable, not the silence, not the space, not even the betrayal I couldn't quite prove. It was the way she started walking past me like I was invisible, like I was a fog she couldn't quite place. The way she reached for the cabinet and didn't excuse herself when I was standing there first. The way she'd scroll through her phone in the same room as me, smiling at something and never once offering to share what it was. There's a kind of loneliness that comes from isolation, but there's a deeper kind that hits when you're surrounded by someone who used to choose you and now chooses anything but. That Monday morning, I was pouring coffee when she came downstairs already dressed, something rare. Her hair was done, makeup on, heels. That perfume again. Big meeting. I asked before I could stop myself. She nodded, distracted. Then, almost casually, she said, with clients. That new guy from Denver's in town. My stomach dropped for reasons I couldn't explain. Denver. It wasn't just the word. It was how her voice softened when she said it. I knew, in my bones, that whoever this new guy was, he wasn't just another face at a conference table. I knew it from how quickly she'd pulled away that night in the kitchen. From the text messages she never let me see anymore. From the way her phone was always face down now. I watched her leave that morning like I always did, standing at the window behind the curtain like some lovesick ghost. She used to turn and wave, even if she was mad at me. That day? Nothing. Just tires crunching down the driveway and a breeze that followed her absence like it missed her too. Around noon, I texted her. Hope your meeting goes well. She didn't respond. Not even a thumbs up. Not even one of those dry K replies she'd toss at me when she was too busy to care. I stared at the screen for half an hour, telling myself I didn't care. That I was above it now. That I was detached. But I wasn't. I wanted to rip the silence out of my chest and throw it at her. I wanted to scream, "Why did you kill this?" But instead, I did what I do best. I waited. Quietly. Stupidly. Like someone who still believed she'd come home and everything would be okay again. That night, she returned late. I was on the couch, pretending to be asleep, but I heard the door open softly, heard her heels click across the tile, not rushed, not guilty, just tired. Or pretending to be. She tiptoed up the stairs, and I heard the shower run. 15 minutes. No words. No, hey. No, sorry I'm late. She used to call me from the car if she was even 10 minutes behind. Now she didn't even acknowledge the hours she vanished into. When she came down in pajamas, her hair still damp, I sat up and asked, "How was your day?" Her answer, the one that nearly broke me, was, "Fine." "Why do you care all of a sudden?" I blinked. All of a sudden? I wanted to remind her that I used to write her notes for her lunchbox. That I used to sit on hold with customer service for 3 hours just to fix her forgotten passwords. That I learned how to cook gluten-free because of her stomach issues, even though I hated every damn recipe. But I said none of that. I just nodded and said, "You're right," and turned the TV back on. She didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. Not one word. And the worst part? It hurt less than it used to. I was getting used to the quiet. Getting used to being erased. I didn't plan to snoop. I swear to God I didn't. That's never been my thing. I've always been the type to believe people until they give me a reason not to. Maybe that makes me naive. Maybe just weak. But that Thursday evening, something shifted. Something snapped into place. She came home earlier than usual, which by itself wouldn't have been strange if not for how startled she looked to find me already there. I was just sitting on the floor in the hallway, fixing the hinge on the closet door that had been squeaking for weeks, a task I used to jump on the moment she'd mention it. This time, I was doing it because I needed noise. Something to drown out the thoughts. She froze the second she saw me, like she'd just walked into a scene that wasn't supposed to exist. Her keys clattered louder than usual in the bowl by the door, and her smile, the one she used to give me without thinking, looked delayed, like it had to pass through 5 layers of filters first. "You're home early," she said, and then quickly added, earlier than usual. I was going to pick something up for dinner. I shrugged, keeping my eyes on the screwdriver. "I'm not hungry." She hovered there for a second longer, then went upstairs, her footsteps slower than usual, almost cautious. That's when I saw it, her purse still hanging open on the chair. Her phone, half tucked in the side, screen lit just for a second with a preview message from a name I didn't recognize. Stone. The message read, "You left your earring. I'm keeping it for luck until I see you again." My body didn't react right away. There was no explosion. No rage. Just this quiet, slow-motion sensation, like someone had pulled a rug from under my life, and I was still midair, waiting for the crash. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. The words were enough. I sat back against the wall, closed my eyes, and tried to breathe like a normal person. Upstairs, I could hear the closet door creak, the one I still hadn't fixed. Ironic. Everything she touched squeaked or jammed or broke, and still I kept fixing it. Still I stayed. Still I made her coffee and folded her laundry and bought new toothpaste without her asking. But she had someone keeping her earrings. Someone she'd seen often enough to start leaving pieces of herself behind. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. My mouth wouldn't work the way it used to. I was afraid that if I spoke, I'd break something in me that wouldn't come back. Instead, I laid next to her in bed, the same bed where I once traced her spine with my fingers and made her laugh in the dark, and I stared at the ceiling while she scrolled through her phone with the screen turned slightly away from me. She didn't notice I wasn't sleeping. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Either way, it didn't matter. Around midnight, she turned off her phone and whispered, "Good night." She hadn't said that in weeks. Maybe months. And I don't know what hit me harder, the fact that she said it, or the way it sounded like a lie. I whispered good night back, and then I got out of bed once I was sure she was asleep. I didn't go far. Just downstairs, to the laundry room, the coldest room in the house. I sat on the dryer, staring at the floor for over an hour, trying to decide whether this was the moment I finally let her go. But the truth? I didn't know how to let go of someone who had already let go of me. That night, I wrote a note. Not to her. To myself. Just one sentence. If she doesn't love you anymore, stop begging to be hurt. I folded it up and slid it into the back of my wallet. And I knew then, the next time I found a clue, I wouldn't sit quietly. The next time she gave herself away, I'd be ready to vanish for real. The next morning started like every other, but nothing felt real. She hummed to herself in the kitchen while scrambling eggs, like the night before hadn't happened. Like I hadn't seen the message. Like she wasn't carrying around someone else's scent tucked behind her ears. I sat at the table with a mug of coffee I didn't want, and watched her move like an actress rehearsing lines from a play we both stopped caring about a long time ago. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, pouring juice. Her voice was light. Casual. Too casual. I gave a small nod. "Fine. You." She paused, just for a beat, and then smiled. "Yeah. Was knocked out. Didn't even hear you get up." That part stuck. Didn't even hear you get up. Not, "Why did you get up?" Not, "Are you okay?" Just a bland, scripted observation. She knew. Deep down, she knew I wasn't asleep the whole night. And she was counting on me not to mention it. That was the game now. Not one of honesty or confrontation, but of omission. Let's both pretend. Let's both smile while we choke. She leaned across the counter and kissed my cheek. Her lips were cold. That kiss used to warm me all day. Now it felt like frostbite. "I'll be home late again," she said, grabbing her keys. "Meeting with the Denver crew." She said it without blinking, without flinching, without shame. I nodded, just once, and looked down at the table so she wouldn't see the expression I was holding back. The moment the door closed behind her, I stood up and went to the bedroom. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I opened her closet. I knew what I was doing was invasive. I knew I was breaking a trust that had already been shattered anyway. But I needed to know. I needed something real. I wasn't looking for proof to accuse her. I was looking for something to prove I wasn't crazy. In the pocket of one of her coats, I found a hotel key card. Just a small, laminated rectangle. No logo. No address. Just a magnetic strip and a number written in black Sharpie. 214. My hands didn't shake. My pulse didn't race. I just stood there, staring at it like I'd found an old photo of a version of her I'd never met. I put it back exactly where I found it. I closed the closet. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. Not for her. Not for a confrontation. I waited for the part of me that always made excuses for her. And when it didn't show up this time, I knew I was finally done pretending. That evening, I told her I was going to my brother's place for the weekend. I don't even have a brother. But she didn't ask questions. She just nodded, too quickly, and said, "Okay, sure. Drive safe." I packed a small bag with enough clothes to make the lie look real, but what I was actually packing was distance. A mental buffer. I didn't go to a hotel. I didn't stay with anyone. I parked my car on a side street 3 neighborhoods away and just sat there in the dark, watching people live lives that didn't hurt. I stayed up all night. And around 2:43 a.m., I texted her. "You didn't even ask me why I needed space." She didn't reply. The next day, I returned home just before noon. When I walked in, I could smell cologne. Not mine. The windows were open. The sheets on our bed had been changed, but not the way she normally did it. Sloppier. Rushed. There was a wine glass in the sink. One. Just one. That's what did it. Not the smell. Not the missing time. Not the sheets. The wine glass. One lonely stem of betrayal, sitting there like it owned the place. I didn't make a scene. I didn't flip the table. I didn't scream. I just sat down at the kitchen counter and waited for her to come home. Because for once, she wasn't going to walk into a lie. She was going to walk into me finally seeing her for exactly who she had become. I was still sitting at the kitchen counter when the lock turned. It was just past 3 p.m., early for her, and the weather had changed suddenly. Gray skies, wind pushing against the windows like it was trying to blow the whole house into truth. I didn't move. I didn't clear my throat or shift to look casual. I just sat there in the same spot where she had left that single glass hours before. The key clicked. The door opened. She walked in fast, talking on the phone, keys jingling, coat half off her shoulder. Laughing. I'll never forget that sound. The laugh. She was laughing like she didn't have a single weight in her entire world. Like nothing in her life needed fixing. But then she saw me, and it all stopped. Her steps paused mid-hallway. Her mouth hung open mid-sentence. She wasn't expecting me to be there. Not at that hour. Not like that. And I knew it instantly. Her eyes flicked toward the kitchen sink. Then toward the coat rack. Then toward her phone, still in her hand. She ended the call without saying goodbye. "You're home early," she said, her voice too tight, too rehearsed. "Did something happen at your brother's?" I let the silence drag. I wanted her to sit in it. I wanted to watch her squirm in the exact emptiness she'd been feeding me for months. "I don't have a brother," I said quietly. I don't even know why I said it. Maybe I wanted to give her a fighting chance. Maybe I wanted to see if she'd finally tell the truth. Her jaw tensed. "What do you mean?" "You heard me." I stood up. "I made him up. Like you've been making up your meetings. Your late nights. Your stories about Denver." She didn't deny it. She didn't even look shocked. She just dropped her bag, leaned against the counter, and sighed like I'd asked her to run a marathon. "Emory, you're reading into things again." That's when I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was insulting. Because even at that moment, with every thread coming loose, she was still trying to gaslight me into believing I was the unstable one. "You left your wine glass in the sink," I said, nodding toward it. "You changed the sheets but didn't bother to flip the mattress. You sprayed cologne over the pillows like I wouldn't notice. You really think I'm that stupid?" She crossed her arms. She wasn't crying. She wasn't panicking. She was posturing the way she always did when she knew she'd been caught but didn't want to lose control of the room. "You've been distant for months," she finally said, her voice low and sharp. "You've been shutting me out, giving me nothing. What did you expect me to do? Not sleep with someone else?" I snapped, louder than I meant to. The silence that followed that sentence might as well have cracked the walls. She didn't say no. She didn't scream or run or explain. She just stared at me like I was a broken lamp she didn't have the tools to fix. Then came the worst part, worse than the betrayal, worse than the lies, worse than the smell of someone else's cologne on her skin. It was the shrug. That tiny shrug, like it wasn't worth defending. Like our entire marriage was a jacket she could toss off and forget. "Do you love him?" I asked, voice hollow. Her mouth twitched. She didn't answer. "Do you love me?" I tried again. That time she laughed. Not a cruel laugh. Not a fake one. A sad, exhausted laugh. "I don't know what I feel anymore, Emory. Everything's just gray." I nodded. I didn't need anything else. I didn't need a full confession or a list of names or a timeline. I already had everything I needed. My body was shaking. Not with rage. With relief. Finally, the fog had a shape. Finally, the guessing was over. "I'll be gone by tomorrow morning," I said. "You won't have to pretend anymore." She blinked, stunned for the first time. "You're leaving?" "No," I said. "I already left. You just didn't notice." And with that, I walked past her, past the perfume, past the lies, past the version of her I'd tried so hard to believe in, and went upstairs to pack. She didn't follow. The next morning, the house was too quiet. I hadn't slept. I lay there all night with my eyes wide open in the dark, memorizing the cracks in the ceiling I'd never bothered to fix. Funny how you start noticing broken things when you're finally ready to leave them behind. Downstairs, the coffee maker started on its own, one of those smart ones she insisted on buying last Christmas when things between us were already starting to sour. I didn't go down. I let it brew for no one. The suitcase was packed. Not full, just enough to make a statement. My charger, a few button-downs, my toothbrush, and the note I'd written in the laundry room days before. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just needed to make sure that when I stepped through that door, it wasn't with the hope she'd chase me. That part of me had to die first. She knocked on the door just after 8 a.m. I didn't say come in. She opened it anyway. Her hair was messy. No makeup. Barefoot. Not the version of her the world saw, but the version I used to love most. It didn't hit me like I thought it would. No surge of longing. No guilt. Just a dull ache behind my eyes. "So, that's it?" she asked. Her voice was small, like she didn't trust it not to break. I stood there, hands on the handle of my bag, and said nothing. "You're really leaving?" she whispered. I looked at her for a long time, and then nodded once. Her eyes didn't well up with tears. Her lip didn't tremble. She just looked stunned, like she never believed I actually had it in me. "Where will you go?" she asked. "Somewhere that doesn't smell like him," I said. It wasn't a cheap shot. It was just the truth. She flinched like I'd slapped her. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she mumbled. "None of it. I didn't plan to," she trailed off, eyes blinking fast. I was lonely. I didn't laugh. I didn't yell. I just stared. "You were lonely while I was still trying. While I was still standing in front of you, asking to be seen. You didn't want comfort. You wanted distraction." She didn't deny it. She sat down on the edge of the bed and said, "I thought you'd never leave me. That no matter what I did, you'd stay." That line cut deep. Not because it was cruel. Because it was honest. Somewhere along the way, I'd trained her to believe that I would always take it. That I'd bend, twist, shrink myself down to nothing just to keep the peace. And maybe I had. Maybe that was my fault too. "That's the problem," I said. "You mistook love for permanence. You thought I wouldn't notice the way you pulled away. You thought I'd keep chasing you. But I got tired. You made me tired." She reached out suddenly, like instinct, like her body moved before her brain caught up. Her fingers grazed my wrist. "Can we fix this?" I didn't move. "Would you have wanted to fix it if I hadn't caught you?" She pulled her hand back. Her silence was the answer. "You don't want to be with me," I said. "You want to not be alone." She wiped her cheek. "Just once. You were my best friend, Emory." That's when I looked down at her, really looked, and realized how far gone we both were. "Then why did you treat me like your backup plan?" She didn't reply. I turned toward the hallway. I was halfway down the stairs when she called out, "Will you tell people what happened?" I stopped, thought about it. "No," I said, "because I'd rather they wonder why I left than pity me for why I stayed." And with that, I walked out the front door. It was colder than I expected. The air sharp, like it was trying to wake me up after years of sleepwalking. I didn't know what came next, but I knew what I just walked away from. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to alive. The first night alone, I didn't cry. I thought I would. I expected some kind of dramatic breakdown in a cheap motel with flickering lights and thin walls. But it didn't happen. I lay in the too-firm bed with a worn blanket that didn't smell like her, and I stared at the ceiling in quiet, stunned peace. It was like someone had lifted a weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying. The silence wasn't cruel anymore. It was clean. I had no plan. No job lined up elsewhere. No idea what city I'd land in. All I knew was that staying would have killed something sacred in me, and leaving, as impossible as it had once seemed, had become the only way to breathe again. I spent a few days driving, sleeping in roadside motels, eating bad coffee and worse gas station sandwiches. But I didn't feel lost. I felt free. I stopped checking my phone. Stopped waiting for her name to pop up. There were no apologies. No frantic texts. No, please come back. And honestly, I was grateful. It meant I didn't have to relive it. I didn't have to argue or explain or fall into the trap of memory. She let me go. I let her go. And slowly, I started picking myself back up. I found a little town a few hours away. Nothing special, nothing trendy. But it had a diner with real pancakes and a bookstore that still sold dog-eared paperbacks for $1. I rented a small apartment over a quiet laundromat. It smelled like fabric softener and cinnamon bread from the bakery across the street. The first morning there, I walked into the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, I didn't, but because I wasn't waiting for her anymore. I wasn't rehearsing arguments in my head. I wasn't inventing new ways to be small so someone else could feel big. I just stood there, brushing my teeth, and smiled. It wasn't a movie moment. It was quiet. Real. Mine. I started writing again, not poetry like I used to when we first met, but small thoughts, little pieces of truth I hadn't let myself say out loud in years. I'd sit at a corner table in the bookstore cafe and scribble until the light changed. No one knew me there. No one expected anything from me. For once, I was just a person, not someone's husband, not someone's mistake, not someone's plan B. Just Emory. Just me. Weeks passed. Then months. I didn't count them like a prisoner marking walls. I let them pass like waves, each one pulling me further from the shore of the man I'd been. Occasionally, I'd get a message, mutual friends asking where I was, if I was okay. I never told them much. Not because I was hiding, but because some stories don't need to be shared to be real. I had lived it. That was enough. And then, one morning, while sipping coffee on a park bench, watching a kid chase a dog through piles of leaves, it hit me. Not a memory, not pain. Gratitude. I was grateful. Grateful that she had rejected my touch that night. Grateful that I had finally listened. Because if she hadn't pulled away, I never would have let go. And if I hadn't let go, I would have never gotten here. A woman sat next to me that day. Striped scarf, auburn curls, book in her hand. She didn't speak right away. Neither did I. But eventually she smiled and said, "You look like someone who's finally at peace." I laughed. Maybe I looked like someone who had been through fire and come out singed but still breathing. I think I am, I told her. We talked for an hour. Then 2. She asked me questions no one had asked in years. Real ones. And I answered without shrinking. When she left, she said, "Maybe I'll see you around." And this time, I didn't feel the urge to chase or overthink. I just smiled and said, "I hope so." I never needed closure from my past. What I needed was to stop living in it. And now, I don't think about what I lost. I think about what I walked toward, a version of myself I didn't even know was still in there. Whole. Healing. Free.